I never imagined that simply doing my job, doing it well and on time, could become a transgression. My name is Sarah, and I'm a single mother. For years, I've worked at Harlow and Price, a company specializing in HR management software. I've always prided myself on being efficient, on respecting deadlines, and on never shying away from responsibility. But then, the new CEO, Ms. Evelyn Cross, arrived, and everything changed. From her very first all-hands meeting, Evelyn Cross laid down the new law with an icy precision. Her voice, though not loud, cut through the polite attentiveness of the room. "Let me be perfectly clear," she stated, her eyes sweeping over us. "Anyone who cannot commit to overtime for personal reasons should seriously reconsider their position at Harlow and Price." A chill snaked through the room. For people like me, single parents, caregivers, those with commitments beyond the fluorescent glow of the office, we were suddenly labeled. We became the problem. Meanwhile, a new breed of employee was lauded, the ones who consistently stayed late, their silhouettes visible in the windows until 9 or 10 p.m. Evelyn hailed them as paragons of dedication. I remember speaking up in one particularly tense departmental meeting. My voice was steady, though my heart hammered against my ribs. "With all due respect, Ms. Cross," I began, "someone staying late doesn't automatically equate to higher productivity. Many of us complete our assignments efficiently within standard working hours. Isn't that worthy of recognition?" My question was met with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, a glacial curve of the lips. Later, I received a friendly warning from HR about my confrontational tone. The message was clear: fall in line or fall out. The pressure mounted. It wasn't just the expectation of staying late, it was the subtle, pervasive culture shift. Lunch breaks became shorter. Conversations by the water cooler dwindled, replaced by a nervous energy. The dedicated few who stayed late would often arrive later in the morning, their desks empty while the rest of us were already deep into our tasks. They'd spend a good portion of their official hours chatting, ordering food, scrolling through social media, only to then burn the midnight oil to complete work that could have, and should have, been done hours earlier. I wasn't the only one who noticed. Whispers started in hushed tones, away from the open-plan desks. We, the 9-to-5ers, the efficient ones, were being systematically painted as less committed, less valuable. It was a suffocating atmosphere, a silent judgment passed every time we packed up to pick up our children or attend to other non-negotiable life responsibilities. The unspoken rule was that your life outside Harlow and Price was a liability. Evelyn, with her sharp suits and even sharper gaze, seemed to thrive on this new dynamic. She'd walk the floors in the late evening, bestowing nods of approval on those still at their desks, a silent commendation that fueled the charade. It was theater, a performance of dedication, and the applause was Evelyn's favor. I tried to adapt, tried to find ways to be even more efficient, to prove my worth within the confines of the clock. I streamlined my processes, cut out any extraneous activity, and delivered flawless work, always on time. But it didn't matter. The new currency was face time, not results. And for those of us who couldn't afford to pay that currency, our value was diminishing daily. The unspoken threat of Evelyn's initial declaration hung heavy in the air. "Reconsider your position." It was a constant, low hum of anxiety beneath the surface of every workday. The next 3 months were a slow bleed. Over a dozen employees, predominantly single mothers or those with known family commitments, were either reassigned to less desirable roles or simply found their contracts weren't renewed. The official reasons were always vague: restructuring, performance metrics, company needs. But we knew the truth. It was a purge, quiet and insidious. Fear is a powerful silencer. Many who remained, Even those who privately disagreed with Evelyn's philosophy kept their heads down. But I couldn't. Something about the injustice of it, the sheer illogic, gnawed at me. I started to watch more closely. And what I uncovered was more than just inefficient work habits. It was a pattern of deliberate deceit. The overtime enthusiasts, as I privately called them, had their routines. The first few hours of the day were often slow, filled with extended coffee breaks, personal calls, and aimless web browse. Then, as the clock ticked towards 5 p.m., a flurry of activity would begin. The activity that should have been spread throughout the day. Their desks, once cluttered with snacks and magazines, would suddenly look like command centers. But it was worse than that. I started noticing discrepancies in project billing, particularly from departments heavily populated by these late stayers. Some were colluding with external vendors, inflating hours and project costs, then splitting the difference. They were exploiting the company's strained finances, using the overtime culture as a smokescreen to line their own pockets. The company, under Evelyn's misguided focus on sheer hours clocked, was being systematically defrauded. I became a silent archivist of this deception. I started documenting everything meticulously. Emails with suspicious timestamps, screenshots of non-work-related websites open on their screens during core hours. I even stumbled upon a group chat they'd carelessly left open on a shared workstation. A conversation so brazen in its admission of time-wasting and kickback schemes that it made my blood run cold. They thought no one was paying attention, that their dedication bought them immunity. One evening, I stayed late myself, under the pretext of finishing a critical report. From the shadows of my cubicle, I watched them. The laughter was a little too loud, the camaraderie a little too forced. They ordered expensive takeout, expensing it as team dinners for late-night projects. They took long breaks, congregating in the empty conference rooms, their voices echoing with boasts and complaints. It wasn't the behavior of a dedicated team pushing through a challenging workload. It was the behavior of people exploiting a system. The irony was bitter. Those of us who were truly productive, who managed our time effectively to meet both our professional and personal obligations, were being pushed out. Meanwhile, these pretenders, these grifters, were being rewarded. Evelyn's narrow definition of commitment had created a breeding ground for inefficiency and corruption. My collection of evidence grew. Spreadsheets detailing inflated vendor invoices cross-referenced with project timelines that showed no actual corresponding increase in output. Email chains where tasks were deliberately delayed until the evening to justify overtime. Even photographs I discreetly took of their computer screens displaying online shopping sites or games during what should have been peak work hours. Each piece of data was a small, sharp stone, and I was slowly, carefully, building a cairn of truth. I didn't know what I would do with it, or when, but I knew I couldn't let it continue. The company, my company, was being hollowed out from the inside, all under the banner of hard work. The tipping point came unexpectedly, as they often do. A major client, one of Harlow and Price's flagship accounts, lodged a formal complaint. They cited significant project delays and, more alarmingly, costs that had spiraled far beyond the initial estimates without any justifiable increase in scope or quality. This wasn't a minor hiccup. It was a potential catastrophe, threatening a multi-million-dollar contract. Suddenly, the boardroom, usually a place of stoic confidence, was buzzing with a nervous energy that Evelyn's pronouncements couldn't quell. The board of directors, previously content to let Evelyn run her show, demanded an immediate and thorough internal investigation into operational efficiency and personnel performance. That's when my meticulously gathered data found its moment. I was summoned, not as an accuser, but as someone whose performance reviews consistently highlighted exceptional efficiency and project completion within budget and deadlines. I was one of the few managers whose department hadn't seen a dip in productivity or an unexplained rise in overtime costs. They wanted to know how. I laid it all out: the falsified timesheets, the patterns of daytime idleness followed by performative overtime, the inflated vendor invoices, the incriminating chat logs. I presented data, not accusations, facts, not opinions. I showed side-by-side comparisons, the output of those who worked standard hours versus the anemic results of the overtime brigade, despite their vastly higher cost to the company. When CEO Evelyn Cross was called to explain, confronted with the cold, hard evidence, her composure finally cracked. She was initially dismissive, then flustered. Cornered, she lashed out, her voice sharp and brittle. "You can't possibly listen to a low-level employee like her!" She spat, gesturing towards me, though I wasn't in that particular high-level meeting. Reports of her outburst reached me later. "She's just a bitter single mother, probably resentful she can't commit like the rest of us." But her outburst only sealed her fate. The evidence was too compelling, too systematic. The numbers didn't lie. My documentation painted a clear picture of a management style that not only failed to foster genuine productivity, but actively encouraged and rewarded deceit. The emergency board meeting convened. It was swift. 6 months after her heralded arrival, Evelyn Cross was officially terminated for abuse of power, discriminatory practices, and gross mismanagement leading to significant financial and reputational damage to the company. The reign of performative overtime was over. The office was stunned. The overtime enthusiasts looked pale and shaken. Some were escorted out the very same day. The silence that descended wasn't just the absence of Evelyn's sharp directives. It was the heavy silence of reckoning. For me, there was no triumph, just a weary sense of vindication and a profound sadness for the damage done. I didn't feel any joy at Evelyn's downfall. Honestly, my primary emotion was a sense of regret for the company, for the good people who had been forced out, for the time and resources wasted. It felt like we had all been through a storm, and now we were left to survey the wreckage. Then came the surprise. A few days after Evelyn's departure, I was called into a meeting with the interim leadership team. I expected, perhaps, a commendation, a thank you for the information I'd provided. Instead, they offered me the role of head of human resources for the entire company. It was a position I had never, not even in my wildest dreams, aspired to. "Sarah," Mr. Henderson, one of the senior board members, said, his gaze direct and surprisingly kind. "You understand our people. You understand what truly motivates them and what demotivates them. You saw the problem when no one else did, or when no one else was brave enough to say it. We believe you're the right person to help us rebuild." And so, I began the daunting task of reform. My first act was to completely dismantle the overtime bonus system that had been so easily exploited. There would be no more rewards for simply occupying a chair after 5 p.m. In its place, we implemented a performance evaluation system based on tangible results, on actual project completion, quality of work, and contribution to team goals, not on the number of hours logged in the office. It was about what you achieved, not how long you appeared to be working. We then overhauled our workflow processes to genuinely support employees with family responsibilities. This wasn't just lip service, it was concrete policy. We introduced flexible working hours, options for hybrid remote work, and better support systems for parents and caregivers. The goal was to create an environment where people could do their best work and live their lives, recognizing that the two weren't mutually exclusive, but, in fact, complementary. It wasn't easy. There was resistance from some who had become comfortable with the old, lax ways, and skepticism from others who had been burned by Evelyn's regime. But we pressed on, focusing on transparency, fairness, and clear communication. We held town halls, solicited feedback, and made adjustments along the way. We brought back some of the talented individuals who had been unfairly pushed out, their return a visible symbol of the company's renewed commitment to its people. The change wasn't instantaneous, but slowly, surely, the culture began to shift. The nervous, watchful energy was replaced by a more relaxed, focused atmosphere. People started taking proper lunch breaks again. Collaboration improved. There was a sense that we were all working towards a common goal based on respect and real contribution. 6 months after the reforms began, the results spoke for themselves. Company-wide productivity had tripled. Yes, tripled. Projects were being completed on time and within budget. Client satisfaction scores soared. We were no longer reliant on the illusion of fake overtime. We were thriving on genuine efficiency and a motivated, engaged workforce. I'm still a single mother. I still leave work on time to pick up my child from school. The difference now is that I do so with my head held high, knowing that my contributions are valued for what they are, not for the hours I'm seen at my desk. And now, as head of HR, I have the profound satisfaction of helping to build a company that doesn't just talk about work-life balance, but actively fosters it. A company that understands that true dedication isn't measured in late nights, but in the quality of work delivered, in the integrity of its people, and in the fairness of its systems. It was a hard lesson for Harlow and Price, a near fatal one, but it taught us that true strength lies not in blind adherence to outdated notions of commitment, but in valuing talent, fostering genuine productivity, and recognizing that the most valuable asset any company has is its people, all of its people, in all of their diverse circumstances. And sometimes, the person who sees the problem most clearly is the one who simply insists on doing their job right and on time. This is Revenger Ruby. If you enjoyed this story of calculated payback, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. You won't want to miss the next tale of sweet, sweet revenge.